Hi guys, it's Dylan from Bijou Diamond Jewellery in London with another video, and today we're going to do a Q&A from questions I asked via Instagram. So I'm sure it's of no surprise that many of the questions were based around what or how the watch industry is affected by the current world situation with coronavirus. So we're going to start with that and take a look at a couple questions that people asked, or common questions people asked around coronavirus and the watch industry. So first one is prices and how prices have been affected by coronavirus. Prices now versus before have not changed that much. I think people were kind of hoping that the prices would really drop on watches. We're definitely seeing some dealers dropping prices majorly on certain pieces, but that's not really out of the ordinary. We're seeing that, in normal times anyway, because sometimes a dealer really needs to get rid of a watch. We are definitely seeing a couple of dealers doing that now, because they need to free up stock to be able to pay for rent and staff and things like that, other expenses and overheads. But it's not, majorly different to normal times. We still see that in normal times anyway. Prices are always affected, obviously, by supply and demand. I'll come on to supply and demand properly in a second, but because the supply is down slightly and also demand is down slightly too, because they've both dipped together, it means that the prices have kind of remained the same. Let's see how that changes over time. We are obviously seeing a lot of people dropping prices on their listings online, much more so than usual, but in terms of what watches are actually being sold for, it tends to be that they're being sold for the standard normal prices. Next bit we're going to look at in terms of coronavirus is how the worldwide demand has been affected. Actually, worldwide watch sales have been down 15 to 20% compared to before coronavirus. So that's a pretty big drop in terms of worldwide sales and watches. However, in the last couple of weeks, we've definitely seen a huge spike of interest back into watches again. We've seen many more sales ourselves and inquiries, much more interest than we have over the last month, say, or kind of beginning of March. I suspect the demand will just continue to rise and rise and rise back to normal levels as kind of the worldwide situation or the world situation stabilizes and people kind of become accustomed to this new way of life. We obviously have been a little bit quieter than usual, but our online sales have been actually better than usual. I think more people obviously realize now that the only way they can get stuff is via the internet. So it's done really well for us. In fact, we're selling a lot of straps all around the world, which is brilliant. And we're selling lots of watches around the world as well, which is fantastic. Next bit is looking at supply. There's not that many dealers that actually are still working. Many dealers have actually just shut down completely and just taking this as kind of like a holiday. There are certain dealers that don't have many overheads, which is brilliant for them. They actually have the ability just to completely shut down, which is great. But because of this, it means that movement of stock is pretty limited. It's difficult for a lot of dealers to get stock, and the fact that boutiques now all across Europe and most parts of the world are shut down as well, it means it's very difficult to get certain pieces of stock. A major factor though in supply is the factories are closed right now and have been closed actually for a little while. That's really going to affect the prices once we come out of lockdown or once we're able to trade normally again and everyone's being able to go back to normal. I suspect that the prices will really spike on watches because I think there'll be a big backlog of orders and people wanting stuff and not many people being able to fulfill those orders just yet while we wait for things to come up and get back to what they used to be. Okay, that kind of concludes our coronavirus bit. There are some other questions in here that are related to coronavirus, but that's kind of the main coronavirus section. The next bit that we're going to look at is Baselworld and the releases. So what's happening with Baselworld and SIHH and the releases of watches for the brands. Baselworld was actually cancelled back in February due to coronavirus, but there's been kind of a big dark cloud around Baselworld for the last couple of years. We've seen some big key brands that have been with Basel for many years actually pulling out of the event, which is a real shame. Swatch Group, for example, a couple of years ago, we've seen LVMH obviously housing their own event now with Hublot Tag under their LVMH banner or umbrella. We saw them host their event in the Middle East this year, their own event, own release event, which was really successful. And I suspect that they will definitely continue doing that from now on. I suspect they probably will move it around the world as well. We obviously know that Audemars Piguet and Richard Mille pulled out of SIHH, and that was really the biggest interest in SIHH was what was Audemars Piguet releasing. But we knew there was some unhappiness around Baselworld and how they handled things with those brands. We knew the brands weren't happy. We heard rumors, and actually Rolex and Patek Philippe both released a statement the other day saying that they will no longer be displaying at Baselworld. We also heard that Chanel, Chopin, Breitling's also pulled out of Baselworld, and Tudor obviously with Rolex, some pretty key brands there that actually generate most of the interest in Basel have now pulled out. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Basel. It's definitely not going to be as big as it used to be. But interestingly, Rolex came out the other day with a statement just a couple days ago announcing that they will be partnering with some other key big brands like Patek Philippe to create their own event, their own release event, and announce watches in their own event. It's going to be in April 2021, which is their first event that they're going to do. Rolex announced that they're going to partner with Patek and other key Swiss watch manufacturers in the effort to unite together and stay strong, keep the Swiss watch industry strong by coming together and announcing stuff at the same event. It'd be interesting to see if Audemars Piguet and Richard Mille follow suit and join their event. I suspect that Audemars Piguet will actually just make their own event and release their own pieces, as has Hublot done and Tag has done. So that kind of shows us what's going to happen now to future events and releases for the brands. But what about 2020? What's going to happen to the releases that we've been looking forward to this year? And obviously there's been so much hype around the Hulk and what watches we're going to get from Rolex, and we've still not seen anything or heard anything yet. Well, actually, Rolex and Patek both came out and announced that they have no interest yet in releasing any watches this year. They're putting their releases on hold. And it sounds to me as if they may not release anything this year, in fact. They've kind of hinted that if they do release something, it'll be towards the end of the year, maybe around September. But it can't be much later than September because then that would kind of be too close to their April release. So whether or not they just knock on all the releases they had lined up and now release them in 2021, I don't know. Or if they'll do a double release in 2021, I'm not sure. But it'd be interesting to find out what they're going to do. But at the moment, we are just as clueless as everyone else. Okay, next question we have is around the Patek Philippe price bubble and kind of the correction that we've seen in prices now. It was referred to as a bubble, but essentially the prices for Patek Philippe watches in the used market went absolutely insane around last summer, 2019 summer, kind of towards the end of the year a little bit as well, but more so 2019 summer. We also saw quite a big spike in Rolex prices as well on certain models. I'm just going to list a couple prices and examples now that we've seen that went to their peak of their spike now to what they've corrected at now. So for Patek Philippe, we had the 5980 in full rose gold on the bracelet. That spiked to around £200,000 in the kind of unworn, so the used market, but in unworn conditions, so brand new. That went up to £200,000 around that mark, and now it's now corrected down to £110,000 to £120,000. So a huge drop back in price now. We also saw the 5711 steel blue dial go up to around £70,000, some of them even more than that, and now they're around a £40,000 to £50,000 mark. So again, big correction there. There are many other watches in their collection that really spiked, but those two are kind of the key models that I wanted to talk about. In terms of Rolex, we saw the steel Daytona spike to around £25,000, some of them even more than that, 26, 27. For an unworn example, now they're going for around £20,000 to £21,000. So big correction there also. I think everyone kind of knew that that this would happen, kind of why people described it as a bubble and when it would burst. That was a constant discussion that we had, especially with clients asking us, when do you think the Patek Philippe price bubble will burst? We all kind of thought that maybe it might continue to grow, but I think deep down everyone knew that eventually it couldn't continue like that. It couldn't sustain that level of growth. Now it's kind of leveled out and been much more stable and back to normal. But one brand though has done really well at this, and that's Audemars Piguet. Audemars Piguet never really spiked or had a bubble while the other brands were kind of going crazy. Audemars Piguet was just leveling, keep on going, really nice smooth growth. Definitely no spikes and insane prices on certain watches. And we're now seeing that the extra thin is the highest price it's ever been, but it didn't spike there, it just continued to grow up there. One question we get asked a lot is, why do you think the bubble burst? And I think there's not 100% one singular reason why the bubble burst. I think there's many different reasons, but kind of you have to think, how many people out there are there that can spend £70,000 on a steel sports watch that really only tells the time and the date, i.e. the 5711. There's not that many people out there. I mean, the retail price on that watch is £24,000, £24,000 anyway, which is a very high retail price for just a very simple steel sports watch. To then sell that watch for £70,000 in the used market, you're really pricing out majority of people. I mean, Patek already prices out majority of people by pricing it at £24,000 for such a simple piece. But the amount of people that can afford that watch at 70,000 is very, very small, and the people that are desperate to buy that watch enough to buy it at £70,000, it's a very tiny pool of people. Once those pool of people have bought that watch, then you're kind of not really expecting to see that many more people come through that desperately want it. Obviously, we know that Philippe Stern from Patek Philippe is not a major fan of what's happened with the Nautilus in terms of the used market and how the prices have just gone crazy. Whenever he's been asked about steel sports watches and whether or not they're going to release more or increase production, he's pretty clear that he has no interest in increasing production on the Nautilus. He obviously discontinued the 5711 with the white dial this year. We know that he really wants to cut back the interest in the Nautilus and bring back the interest in the dress watches, which is what Patek Philippe is about. And the next question we're going to take a look at is one watch versus another. We get asked these questions all the time via Instagram direct messages, Instagram comments, phone calls. First one I'm going to discuss is probably our most popular question, and that is the Submariner versus the GMT Master from Rolex. For me, the Submariner wins. I absolutely love the Submariner. I love the simplicity of the watch. I love the brushed finish. It makes it kind of a bit more understated versus the GMT Master with the polished center links. And of course, on the steel versions now, you have a Jubilee bracelet, which is much more louder, much more blingy, and kind of more expensive, or obviously expensive. The Submariner, the Submariner bezel also is slightly more simple. The dial is more simple. I just prefer the more simplistic, classic look that the Submariner has. But please do check out my individual review of these two watches, or comparison of these two watches, because that goes much more in depth about all the different features and the differences between these watches and who I think each piece is for. So go check that out. Next, we're looking at the comparison between the 5711 and the 15202. So the Nautilus versus the Royal Oak from Audemars Piguet. Personally, I absolutely love the Audemars Piguet, the Royal Oak. I think it's an absolutely stunning piece. It's one of my favorite watches in the whole entire world. It machines beautifully. The effects that the bracelet creates with light, the kind of scintillation and twinkle that the actual bracelet creates is unbelievable. It's so beautiful. I don't think really anything matches that bracelet in the whole industry. Again, please go check out my individual reviews of these watches, but more importantly, my comparison video looking at both of these watches. So go check that out. Next question we get asked quite a lot is Tag versus Omega. Which do we prefer, Tag or Omega? Personally, I like Omega. I find the quality of Omega, the finishing, the design on their watches is above Tag. The quality of the watches is definitely above Tag. I find they're much more reliable watches, the Omegas. The presentation is on a much higher level than Tag also. In fact, I think Omega's presentation is probably the best in the whole industry. I mean that above Patek Philippe, above Audemars Piguet, above Richard Mille. Omega's way to present their watches in their boxes is amazing. It's so beautiful. They put just as much effort into presenting their watches as they do the actual watch itself. I think there's a lot of things though to discuss in this comparison between those two brands. I think they obviously feature things for different clients and appeal to different people. Again, something I'm going to have to discover or discuss in a whole different video, so stay tuned for that. Next question we're going to look at is, what do I think of the Apple Watch? We get asked this quite a lot, in fact. Lots of our clients, in fact, do own the Apple Watch, and those clients own Patek Philippe's, Richard Milles as well. Classic watches like Breguet's. There's this kind of stigma that stigma with the Apple Watch, that if you own mechanical watches, that you can't own something like an Apple Watch, or it's sacrilege to own something like an Apple Watch. That's definitely not true. The Apple Watch is not trying to compete with a Patek Philippe, grand complication or a complicated Patek. They're completely different pieces. That's not what Apple's going for with the Apple Watch. The Apple Watch is just a great digital sports watch. Kind of helps you with all sorts of things like emails and texts and phone calls and things like that as well. I think they're really great. I personally wouldn't own one. I can see the appeal of them, definitely, but I always try not to be on my phone as much as possible. I try and leave devices alone as much as I can, and try and do other things. So if I had a device on my wrist or strapped to me the whole time, I think I'd find that more difficult. So I personally wouldn't own one. And really, for me, I just love mechanical watches. I love the heart and the soul that a mechanical watch has. I just like the simplicity of a mechanical watch as well. So for me, I personally wouldn't own one, but we definitely have a lot of clients that absolutely love their Apple Watch. Next question we're going to look at is what are our most popular watches? Our most popular watch used to be the Steel Daytona, but since the prices have gone so high on that watch, it's really priced a lot of people out of that piece, to the point where it's actually not one of our most popular models now. It definitely is up there, but the amount of people that can spend 20 odd thousand pounds on a steel sports watch that really has a retail price of £10,000, you're looking at a very specialist audience, or a very niche audience that can actually afford that. So it's no longer really one of our most popular models. Our current most popular models, though, I'm going to split up into brands and look at our most popular model from each brand. So we're going to start with Omega. Our most popular model from Omega is the Seamaster, the Seamaster range or collection. Kind of all models of the Seamaster, but most specifically the Planet Ocean. We find a lot of people absolutely love the Planet Ocean. It's definitely one of our most popular Omegas here at Bijou Diamond Jewellery. Next, we've got from Rolex, the GMT Master. We found them easily our most popular Rolex. I think because Rolex revamped the whole line of the GMT Masters, it's definitely generated a lot of new, fresh interest in the GMT line. And even the older models that they've been discontinued, lots of people are looking at those too. Next, from Patek Philippe, we've got the Aquanaut, specifically in steel, just the standard 5167 simple Aquanaut. We find that one of our most popular Patek Philippe's. Actually, also another really popular model for us from Patek is the 5205 annual calendar. We find that really, really popular with us. In fact, the blue dial white gold version, we've sold several of those watches because they are just absolutely beautiful. It's not hard to see why. It's one of my favorite watches ever as well. Moving now on to Audemars Piguet, we find the steel Royal Oak chronograph our most popular model, specifically the 26331. The blue dial is really popular with us. The black dial is really popular. I'd say probably the Panda dial is our most popular model, the kind of white or silvery dial with the black sub dials. I love that watch. The blue dial is probably the most special looking. It's definitely a beautiful piece. Next little bit that we're going to look at, though, in terms of our most popular watches and brands, is actually our new popular brand, and that is Tudor. That's really gained a lot of popularity within the last couple of years. It used to be very unpopular for us. We didn't used to get many Tudor requests at all, but since they kind of introduced the Black Bay and the 58 as well, the Black Bay 58, that really generated a lot of interest in the brand. We found that a lot of people are looking at Tudor now. And definitely since Rolex has continued to increase their retail prices over the years, to the point that these steel watches are now kind of not so affordable anymore. So it's priced a lot of people out of the steel sports, Rolex market. And Tudor obviously comes along with a very similar design, kind of more looking at the heritage of Rolex and the history of Rolex. Designs, influenced by the original Submariner and the original GMT Master, that people are starting to look at Tudor instead for their kind of entry-level Rolex. And we're finding that a lot of people that buy the Tudors are actually more watch enthusiasts than the people that buy the Rolex. People that buy the Rolex tend to not really care that much about watches. They kind of just want them almost because they're just fantastic watches for everyday use. They know they're reliable. The brand kind of sells itself. Okay guys, that concludes our Q&A from this week. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, all these questions were asked via Instagram. If you want to ask us more questions for our next Q&A, then follow me on Instagram. We obviously have our company account as well, our Bijou Diamond Jewellery company account, but I tend to ask the questions for upcoming videos on my own personal Dylan Bijou account. So go follow that. The link to my account is in the description below. Stay tuned, follow me on that account, and stay tuned for my next Q&A video where you can ask the questions for me to answer.